You need to hear this now. Because when global powers start talking about thousands of foreign fighters being wiped out, the clock is no longer ticking quietly. It's blaring. This is the kind of moment history looks back on and asks one question. Did people see it coming? This isn't just another headline in a long war. This is about whether the world is sliding from controlled conflict into open confrontation, and whether everyday people are being pulled into the consequences without realizing it. Your fuel costs, your food prices, your national security, the stability of entire economies, this is where it starts to connect. Wars don't explode overnight. They expand through signals, claims, and pressure that force leaders to react fast and think later. Stay with me, because by the end of this report, you will understand why these claims are being made now, who they are meant to shake, and how power is being recalculated in real time. This begins with one urgent reality. Russia signals direct confrontation with NATO involvement. Russia signals direct confrontation with NATO involvement. And you need to understand what that actually means right now, because this is not rhetoric floating in the air. This is a pressure move aimed straight at the power centers of the West. When Moscow publicly frames the war as one involving fighters from the United States, the United Kingdom, and allied nations, it is deliberately collapsing the distinction between a proxy conflict and a direct clash. That line matters. It has kept this war contained. And Russia is now saying loudly that the line no longer exists. This isn't about battlefield bragging. This is about redefining who is already inside the war, whether governments admit it or not. Once that framing sticks, NATO leaders are forced into a corner. Deny involvement and risk looking weak or dishonest, or acknowledge deeper participation and accept escalation risks their own populations were never prepared for. Foreign fighter casualties used as escalation warning. And this is where the urgency spikes. Claims of mass foreign losses function as a signal flare, not a statistic. Wars are not only fought with artillery and drones, they are fought with narratives designed to force reactions. By asserting that thousands of Western-linked fighters have been eliminated, Russia is sending a message upward through political systems, not downward to soldiers. The message is simple. Your people are already paying the price, and the bill is growing. This kind of claim puts enormous pressure on NATO governments because it reframes the conflict from support, at a distance to blood, on the ground. Even if unverified, the claim forces officials to respond, to deny, to clarify, to manage panic, to control media fallout. Silence looks like confirmation. Overreaction looks like guilt. Every option carries cost. This is how escalation works in modern conflict. It doesn't begin with declarations of war. It begins with claims that force accountability. When a state asserts that foreign nationals are dying in large numbers, it is daring other governments to either step forward or step back. There is no neutral space left. And here's the part most people miss. This isn't aimed at military planners alone. This is aimed at voters, taxpayers, workers, families, because once a war is perceived as killing our people, political tolerance collapses fast. That's the leverage. Look at the structure beneath the headline. NATO's strength has always rested on unity without direct exposure. Funding, weapons, training, intelligence, yes, but not mass casualties. The moment that changes even rhetorically, the alliance faces internal strain. Different countries have different thresholds for pain. Different economies absorb shocks differently. Different electorates ask different questions. Russia knows this. Broadcasting alleged foreign deaths is designed to widen those cracks. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. Defense budgets across NATO are already under strain. Energy markets remain volatile. Inflation is sticky. Governments are juggling domestic discontent alongside foreign commitments. When Moscow escalates the narrative, it compounds existing pressure. Suddenly, the cost of the war is no longer abstract. It's not just aid packages and sanctions. It's lives. Whether confirmed or not, perception drives politics. This is why the claim itself matters more than its immediate verification. In wartime, narratives move faster than facts. They shape public mood before intelligence agencies finish assessments. By the time official denials arrive, the emotional impact has already landed. People hear thousands dead, and they don't wait for footnotes. They ask why. They ask who decided. They ask what comes next. And make no mistake, this also functions as a deterrent message. Russia's saying continued involvement carries escalating human cost. It is an attempt to raise the perceived price of staying the course. If NATO governments hesitate, if support fractures, if political backing weakens, the strategic balance shifts. This is economic warfare layered onto military conflict. Every claim is calibrated to stress systems, not just armies. At the same time, the message is aimed inward toward Russia's own population. Casting the war as a fight against Western forces reinforces domestic legitimacy. It reframes hardship, sanctions, and losses as necessary sacrifices against powerful external enemies. That framing stabilizes internal support while amplifying external pressure. It's a two-directional strategy. Now zoom out. When great powers begin naming each other in casualty narratives, even indirectly, history tells us escalation risk accelerates. Not because leaders want total war, but because the space for de-escalation narrows. Admitting error becomes politically impossible. Backing down looks like weakness. Each side doubles down to maintain credibility. And credibility is the currency here. NATO's credibility rests on deterrence without direct war. Russia's credibility rests on demonstrating. It cannot be contained or exhausted quietly. When Moscow claims massive foreign casualties, it is challenging the very premise of controlled involvement. It is saying control is already gone. This is why responses from Washington, London, and Brussels matter more than the claim itself. Watch the language. Watch whether officials emphasize denial, deflection, or deterrence. Each choice signals a different path. Strong denial seeks to restore the old framework. Ambiguous statements suggest internal uncertainty. Hardened rhetoric signals readiness to absorb further escalation. Markets will react before diplomats do. Energy prices, defense stocks, currency movements. These are early indicators of how seriously the claim is being taken behind closed doors. Economic actors price risk faster than governments admit it. That's where the truth leaks out. And underneath it all is a structural reality no one can escape. Prolonged war reallocates resources. Social spending competes with defense. Domestic stability competes with foreign policy ambition. When casualty narratives intensify, those trade-offs become unavoidable. Political coalitions strain. Elections loom larger decision. Makers shorten timelines. This is the moment where wars either calcify into long-term confrontation or tip into wider conflict, not because of a single battle, but because narratives harden positions. Russia is forcing a conversation NATO did not want to have openly. How involved is too involved? How much cost is acceptable? And who decides? There is no clean answer, only pressure. And that pressure just increased. NATO credibility tested under battlefield pressure as the alliance faces a moment it has worked for decades to avoid, being seen not just as a supporter, but as a participant under fire. Every claim of foreign casualties tightens the vice on alliance unity because credibility isn't declared, it's measured by response. If NATO hesitates, deterrence weakens. If it escalates, risks multiply. At the same time, the war narrative shifts from Ukraine to great power clash. And that shift is seismic. This is no longer framed as a regional defense effort, but as a confrontation between power blocks with global consequences. Once that framing takes hold, diplomacy narrows, military postures harden, and economic shockwaves spread, turning a battlefield conflict into a systemic test of global order casualty claims weaponized for psychological impact, as information itself becomes a frontline weapon in this conflict. Numbers are deployed not to inform, but to unsettle, forcing governments and publics into emotional reactions before facts can stabilize the story. This strategy targets nerves, not units, aiming to exhaust political will rather than military capacity. Western public opinion becomes new battleground because democracies fight with consent, and consent erodes under fear and uncertainty. When voters believe their nations are already bleeding, pressure mounts to either escalate decisively or withdraw support, compressing decision time and amplifying risk across the entire alliance. Economic strain deepens as conflict intensity rises, and this is where the war reaches far beyond the front lines. Prolonged fighting forces governments to pour money into defense while inflation, debt, and energy volatility tighten the squeeze at home. Every escalation amplifies costs that citizens feel immediately, turning economic pressure into political instability. Red lines blurred between proxy war and direct conflict, as foreign involvement becomes harder to deny and easier to provoke. Once those lines fade, miscalculation risk spikes, diplomacy narrows, and what was managed indirectly begins, sliding toward open confrontation under mounting economic and strategic stress. Strategic messaging replaces verified battlefield facts as speed and impact overtake confirmation in the race to shape perception. In this environment, claims move markets, shift alliances, and harden public opinion long before evidence arrives, locking leaders into reactive postures. Global security order enters high-risk phase because when narratives outrun diplomacy, escalation becomes structural, not accidental. Power blocks interpret intent through headlines instead of back channels, shrinking space for compromise. The result is a world where deterrence is tested daily, misreads multiply, and stability depends less on agreements and more on who controls the story in real time. What you've just seen is not speculation. It's a warning pattern. Casualty claims are being used as weapons. Alliances are under stress. Economies are absorbing shock. And the lines between proxy war and direct conflict are fading fast.